When you look at your fantasy roster, is it balanced? When you consider your life, is it balanced? Let's unpack it. This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast, where we unpack fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson with Tripp Smith from Hope Community Church, and we are your fantasy coaches here to encourage you and help you win while you play fantasy football with purpose. As we provide fantasy advice, we won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing. We are coming to you live here at 2:45-ish from the Unpacking It Ministry studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm wearing my Upward Sports shirt today, wearing my Unpacking It hat. I tried to get a haircut. I couldn't get one in this week, so my hair's too long. I need a hat on today, but glad to be with you. We've got a full show today. 5 weeks into the NFL. We've got teams coming off of buys. We've got more injuries to discuss. Go check out the Unpacking It podcast. Did a whole podcast today about injuries. We looked at it from a spiritual standpoint, relating it to temptation and sin. So encourage you to check that out. Ed Yazinski was awesome on that podcast. But we will talk about the fantasy ramifications with these injuries and what adjustments do we make to our rosters. And one thing to consider today too, when do we trade for injured players? And then when do we trade injured players away? That might be something we need to get into today. Curious your thoughts on that. You can always leave comments about that or anything else, any questions you have with your fantasy lineups and fantasy decisions. Aaron, our producer, is all mad at me because I said, forget Rashid Shaheed. He's got nothing. And then he had a big game last night. He actually Rashid, his performance almost came back to cause me to lose, but I hung on to the win. So that was good in one league. But come on. Rashid Shaheed, you don't want to ride that roller coaster, Aaron. Get off. You jumped off the roller coaster. You missed it on Monday night, but you'll be fine when he goes for 2 catches in the next coming weeks with maybe Derek Carr being out. So that's another thing to consider. All right. Be sure to check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Sign up to be a member. It's not too late. Midway through the season, jump in, participate with the breakout content. We will get to this week's breakout in just a moment. As we talk about balance in life and also balanced fantasy rosters. One other quick note here at Unpacking It, we're gearing up for the 9th annual Unpacking It Golf Tournament presented by Strategic Planning Corporation. We are fired up about it. We're looking to fill the final few spots. But if you'd like to participate or be able to support it, check out unpackingit.com/golf. For more information. But that's our big fundraiser for the ministry each year. So we're excited about that. We'll still do a show that week. So I'll be coming off the golf course. I don't play, but I put on the tournament. But then we'll come in and do a show in a couple weeks. But let's jump in with some fantasy shenanigans. This is where we sort of recap the weekend, share some highlights and the things that went right and wrong and confusing and surprising. Here we go.
Fantasy shenanigans.
All right, Tripp, good to see you, buddy. How you doing? How you coming off the weekend? You feeling all right?
I'm great, man. I thought it was a great football weekend. And just zooming out a little bit, is it that this the best time of the year? The weather is changing. October feels beautiful. We've got great professional football. We got great college football this weekend, playoff baseball. I mean, I had a good weekend enjoying a bunch of different sports, watching some of those upsets in college on Saturday. And then I thought the NFL games were great, a lot of fun, with the exception of the first and the last one. That London game, it just feels like always sort of under performs. It's just it's never as exciting as you want it to be, it seems like. And then the Monday night game was a little bit of a clunker. I think it's safe to say the Saints have fully come back to earth, and there just wasn't a lot going on in that game. But everything in between was a ton of fun, man. I had a good weekend.
I don't want to say I told you so on the Saints, but I told you so on the Saints. But Shaheed was pretty good. And the Chiefs, I mean, they looked better last night. That was probably one of their better games last night. And that was without Rashee Rice, but it just sort of freed Mahomes up to throw to everybody and anybody all the running backs were involved. Steele, though, the hype, that's over.
It's over. It's over.
He had the one kind of missed handoff, but Hunt got into the end zone. P. Ryan with the fun play with Kelsey. Apparently that wasn't scripted. I still can't get over that. That was so smooth. The little pitch. My wife came down. I was watching the game, and I go, "Oh man, that happens all the time in flag football, but so rare in the NFL." But it's a fun play. So
yeah, the Chiefs. I mean, they're 5-0, and it feels like they haven't hit their stride.
No.
And the big talk around Patrick Mahomes is that he's not putting up the big fantasy numbers that you have thought of him in years past, and really for about a season and a half. He hasn't been doing that. But I just remember the days of like Brady being in his prime when it seemed like you could just surround him with any players. And he wasn't necessarily going to put up huge numbers, but he was just going to find a way to win, just not make too many mistakes. And they were always in it at the end. And then nobody's more clutch than Mahomes when it comes to like, so he didn't need to be last night, but they're 5-0 and it feels like they're not playing their best football yet. They're just going to win the Super Bowl again.
It does seem inevitable. It really does. The Ravens,
inevitable.
The Ravens will have something to say about that, and we'll talk later about the Bills if they can get it back together. But and even the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals put up huge fantasy numbers for us, so we'll talk about that. Actually, let me just jump in on that. I ended up playing Jordan Love instead of Joe Burrow. It was a last-second decision, and it was a foolish decision. But I sort of talked myself into, this might be like one of those AFC North grinded out, low scoring games, Ravens, Bengals. I was sadly mistaken. It wasn't the Steelers. What am I thinking? And so it was a shootout. I missed out on all those Joe Burrow points. Thankfully, I still won that league, but still, it was unfortunate. But the biggest shenanigans today, of course, the Jets. And I'm sure if you turn on any sports show, they're talking about the Jets today. We won't get into all of it, but from a fantasy perspective, Robert Saleh's fired. Aaron Rodgers, annoys all of us as fans of football. Just come on, man. Enough is enough. Like, it's just one thing after another. And so Garrett Wilson has a big week this past week in London. The Jets were terrible. They weren't terrible. They struggled. Breece Hall can't get going offensively. What do you make of the Jets so far and moving forward in light of this coaching change?
It's hard to know, man. I really do think that Aaron Rodgers is just not a great teammate, and I'm not sure that Saleh was he wasn't a strong enough personality to be sort of a decisive coach when you've got a guy like that, who, literally the whole hope of the team is pegged on this guy who you can just make an argument from a character perspective is maybe not the kind of guy that you want leading your team. He threw 3 interceptions. All right. And he made plenty of mistakes in this game. He has not looked elite this year, but it just seems like he's always blaming someone else. Now, I'm not worried about Garrett Wilson because he had a huge game and it could have been an even bigger game. Some of the other parts there, including Breece Hall, I think I am getting a little bit worried about. And now, who knows what the rest of the season looks like for the Jets.
I'm going to try to sell high on Garrett Wilson because he just played in a big game for the right trade, but he is going on the trade market because I don't want to ride this Jets roller coaster the rest of the way. Too unreliable. Now, we've seen interim coaches come in and provide that spark for teams. I don't know. I don't know if that'll be the case for them or not, but I'd rather not try to go down that path.
Was it Jeff Ulbrich? I have a hard time believing that
if he
Jeff
walked
Ulbrich,
in right now, I wouldn't know who he is.
I have a hard time believing that he is going to come in and sort of be the powerful personality that negates Aaron Rodgers' negativity, So, we'll see, man. I want Garrett Wilson to be good because I have him in so many places.
You do. So
I was a believer.
on it.
I was a believer before the beginning of the season. But if you told me right now you could go trade him for, I don't know. If you could get Mooney, Darrell Mooney, and then like another good player thrown in, so you split your Garrett Wilson shares into a surprising wide receiver and a good running back or something like that. That's a trade.
There's
depending
on
where my team is at, I might make a trade like that.
Yeah, no, it's intriguing. All right, a couple other shenanigans from the weekend. Of course, injury-wise, my boy Nico Collins, he was playing well. He makes the big touchdown. Then he goes out with the dreaded hamstring injury. Are you kidding me? And then Devon Achane, playing well. He's a good running back. Now he's got the concussion issue, it looks like. So that was those were 2 big injuries for me that I was bummed about. And then some other shenanigans. You've got the Falcons lighting it up on offense. Kirk Cousins comes in. Thankfully, he was my bye week quarterback, so he was great for me, 500 yards. But Bijan Robinson, Hello, can anyone find him? Can we get the ball to Bijan Robinson? It's just baffling. So I was telling producer Aaron earlier today, I'm not so worried. Like, as long as Bijan is healthy and out there, at some point the ball has to end up in his hands. I just have to believe that Atlanta, in certain games and all that, they have to run the ball. Like, when the season gets going at the end of the year during the fantasy playoffs, running backs are huge. It's cold. You run the ball. It's just the way the season goes. It gets tighter. Games are tighter. You run the ball more. So it was cute. 500 yards for Kirk Cousins. I loved it. We've bought into, I know I bought into the offense. I think you have too. Kind of this season, we'll be patient. The passing game now has exploded. Still be patient with the running game. I'm still standing by that, but definitely some shenanigans on Thursday night. That was wild. That was a fun game. I enjoyed
really
that.
Fun game. Yeah.
So, anything else? So Cowboys shenanigans, your boy CeeDee Lamb. What do you make of him and Dak and the tension there?
Well, I said a few weeks ago that I wanted CeeDee to act more like an alpha, act a little bit more like a diva, and then he went and yelled at Dak about something. All these lip readers are trying to tell us what he said, and then he did not see any targets for like 15 minutes of game time. So that doesn't feel good. That's not a good sign. So maybe he needs to be a little bit nicer to Dak. I don't think I'm worried about CeeDee. I think he'll be fine moving forward. The team I want to ask you about is what do you think about the Bears? There's this whole the Panthers probably are still bad, and so they did this against the Panthers, but every week Caleb Williams looks a little bit better. I think his passer rating has gone up every week of the season so far, and this week it was great news for DJ Moore, who absolutely exploded. But also it's kind of making DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson relevant. It makes their whole offense at least more likely to start in your starting lineup on fantasy. So are the Bears legit, or was this just the little Panthers boost? They have the longest winning streak at home of any team in the NFL right now,
which is wild.
Yeah, crazy.
They're playing well. They're legit. I'm not sure that I'm going to trust them to win me a championship. I mean, DJ Moore has really been quarterback proof for the most part. Right. Like he's been a high producer for many years now with the Panthers and the Bears. So I like DJ Moore a lot. Roma Dunze, I think, continuing to rise. I like him, but I don't want Keenan Allen. He hasn't done much yet, and I don't expect him to. I'm not buying that. And then the 1-2 punch with the running backs, I don't trust DeAndre Swift. So he's played well the last 2 weeks. They lit a spark under him a little bit because there was threats of Roschon is going to be the guy. We all picked him up on waivers, and then it goes back to Swift, but Roschon still vultures some touchdowns. I still like Roschon going forward. I think
so. Yeah.
Now I'm not dropping Swift necessarily, but just if I'm looking at those two guys, I like the way Roschon plays and runs, and Swift seems to every year either get injured or fizzle out at some point in the season.
Right.
And so I'm always worried about that. But as far as the future for the Bears, I mean, they're pretty
trending
legit.
In the right direction. They have a really easy schedule coming up in terms of like just an offense versus some softer defenses. So I'm going to keep an eye on them, but by the time I'm ready to buy in, it might be too late. So
true. All right. One last thing, this is more of an excitement. Tyrone Tracy. I did mention him on last week's show, right? I did say, hey, I stashed this guy on my team. He didn't put up big numbers like Thursday night, a week ago, but then he gets the chance. Devin Singletary is out, the rookie running back for the Giants. Very impressive. So I'm all excited about him. Even if Singletary comes back, I think he can at least be a flex play. And then if they really say, all right, let's push Singletary more to the side, he's got a chance to be, RB3, maybe an RB2 at times. So very excited about that. So hopefully everyone picked him up on waivers this past week when it was a buy low situation.
The Giants are another one of those teams that I don't know what to believe anymore, because Malik Neighbors did not play in this game. Daniel Jones looked great, and they beat the Seahawks, So now all of a sudden you're talking about maybe some of these guys are going to be relevant, and Tracy is a priority pickup if he's on waivers in your league.
We will do bandwagon riding in a little bit, but the Giants are an interesting team because you can throw in, multiple wide receivers, as well as Daniel Jones. Are you jumping on their bandwagon? And Jones has big weeks.
Right.
But he also has really bad weeks. And so can you trust him? I'm trying to think what tier. I guess he's in the Trevor Lawrence tier, and guys we're still trying to, even Caleb Williams, like we're still trying to wonder and figure out, okay, can we trust these guys? I don't know if we now add Sam Darnold to the mix after his poor performance against the Jets, or was that really the Jets defense, which it probably was. Well, I'm not in on Sam Darnold, but hey, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that it was the Jets defense. So every week it's looking at matchups. It's trying to learn the most that we can based on previous matchups, but the season is long. Things change rapidly. And so I'm loving life. Nico Collins scoring a touchdown the next moment. He's on the sideline. Then he was day to day, and now he's week to week. So what's the day to day, week to week? What is different between day to day and week to week is what I want to know. Because Schefter comes out, the first report is he's day to day, and then later, no, let me change that. He's week to week. All right, what do I learn from that?
Was that big 70-yard bomb the play that he went out on? Right,
I think
he tweaked the hamstring.
I think so.
He was just too fast, too strong, too fast. And like you said, those things linger. I think he'll stay out exactly as long as they keep winning games. So if they win games without him, then they're going to rest him. That team has playoff aspirations, and they're thinking deep run into the playoffs. So
the Texans are another team like the Chiefs that have yet to hit their stride.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're playing well enough to win games, but the ceiling is there.
Yeah.
So, and they haven't hit that ceiling yet. All right. So last shenanigans from the weekend. Let us know your thoughts. What stood out? What crazy finishes did you experience in your fantasy matchups? Did you win or lose last night on Monday Night Football? If you were relying on Derek Carr, man, that was a tough night. Even Alvin Kamara didn't do much. So that was tough. And Olave. Oh my goodness.
4 points. Yeah.
We'll do peace or panic in a little bit. Talk more about that. But let's jump into this week's breakout topic, where we take a fantasy concept related to the Bible, related to life. And this week we are talking balance. All right. So let's start from the fantasy perspective. One of the most important things we do as fantasy managers is create the best we can, a balanced roster. So when we go into drafts and then throughout the entire season, as we evaluate, drops and adds and trades, how do we remain balanced? And there are multiple ways that this factors in. So the obvious way is we're not going to go out and draft 3 tight ends or 3 elite tight ends in the first 5 rounds at the expense of drafting running backs, right? Okay, that's kind of a silly thing to do. We know we can't have 5 quarterbacks on our roster. Any standard league, it's 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers and tight end, some flex spots. Maybe if you're still in an old-fashioned league, you've got kickers and defenses. I've eliminated both in all 5 of my leagues, but those are the lineups. And so you have to have a balance. You have to have some running backs. You have to have some receivers. You have to have guys that are legit that you can count on week in, week out. And then you have to have some upside guys that might break out later in the season. You can have some boomer bust guys, but if your receivers are every week Jamison Williams and Jalen Waddle and Rashid Shaheed, that is a roller coaster ride. So you want to have a balance where you're getting some steady guys. You throw in a Christian Kirk. You throw in, I don't know, think of a reliable receiver when Adam Thielen is playing well, like those kind of guys. So you have to have those in the mix. So you have to have a balanced roster. And then you don't want all rookies because rookies are risky. So it's great to have some rookies. It's great to have some veterans. It's great to have, some tight ends that you can on your bench, 1 tight end on your bench that is a reliable bye-week fill-in. But if you have an out of balance or an unbalanced roster, you're going to be in trouble. You might have 5 great receivers, but then you got 2 great receivers on your bench every week that aren't in your starting lineup. And so it's unbalanced. And so, Trip, from a fantasy perspective, what is your philosophy on creating a balanced roster and maintaining a balanced roster? Because injuries can affect that rapidly, or poor performances. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, man, I'm so strong at receiver, but now my tight end situation is a nightmare.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think I'll tell you how I do this well, and then how I mess up on this. So I think there are always these sort of young kind of hype players that come into the league or in their second season, and they've got all of the hype and the energy and the dynamism around their game, and they're sort of boom or bust players. And there are these boring, reliable receivers and running backs like you're talking about who nobody says, hey, great move, man, great pick when you draft that player at the beginning of the season. But hey, come the bye weeks, which start this week, you feel good about having one of those guys that you can just put in your lineup and count on 10 to 12 points in that flex spot. So I'm pretty good about finding those guys and saving them on my bench and having some of those reliable older players. What I have not been good at the last few seasons is prioritizing every position equally. So it's well known at this point that I love wide receivers. I love to get a bunch of good dynamic wide receivers on my team. And I've neglected running back on pretty much all my teams this season. And I'm counting on guys like Rico Dowdle, Chase Brown, who they came through this week, and in some weeks that looks really great. But man, just to have a guy that you can just plug and play at every position feels really good. And that's the big mistake that I make, is not balanced across all positions.
Well, we complement each other well because I lean heavy on
the
running
RB
backs.
guy. We should draft together.
So you look at my roster. Sometimes my bench is filled with running backs, and it's like, I got too many running backs on my bench. So if a quarterback goes down or a tight end goes down, I don't always have the depth there. So it can be concerning. So the bottom line is, building and maintaining a balanced roster in fantasy football can be challenging, but it's what we strive to do to experience a thriving fantasy season, to get through the season and to put ourselves in position to win. And so what about in life? How often do we consider and evaluate whether or not we're living a balanced life? And I think there's some misconceptions even about the word balance when it comes to life. And so we can kind of unpack that a little bit. But the bottom line today is, okay, how do we build and maintain a thriving life that has balance? And I know in my own life, when I get, out of balance, where, okay, work becomes way more of a priority and it becomes, how I spend all my time, then other things start to fall through the cracks and they're neglected. And all of a sudden I look at my life and I go, okay, man, I got five tight ends and no running backs. But it's like, man, I've got so much going on at work, but wait, I haven't even responded to these friends, or, man, I'm not spending enough time with my wife. And then sometimes we can spend maybe even so much time with our family that we have no friendships. Then we look around and we go, man, I need a friend. I need to have some guy time. I live in a house full of women. So sometimes I spend my whole weekend with women. It's like, I just need a guy. I gotta hang out with somebody. I gotta be able to let one rip, So those are the kind of things that you just need. But here's the thing. When we get out of balance too, where it's like work all the time and then we don't sleep, or we spend so much of our money, like do we have a balanced budget? We're spending so much money on ourselves that we're not giving, or we're spending so much time on ourselves that we're not serving. So there's so many areas where it's like, wait, I'm getting so unbalanced here. Let me evaluate and let me add a running back here, right? Let me add some more time. I need to spend more time in this area. Give this more attention. And I don't think that balance means everything is even. I spent 40 hours at work, and so I've got to spend 40 hours doing this. That's not realistic. But we evaluate according to our life, our season of life, and seek the Lord for wisdom in making wise choices in how we structure our lives, maintain our lives, and ultimately we build our lives around him, with him. But just from a general standpoint, Trip, how often do you consider balance, and what is maybe even your challenge when it comes to having balance in life?
I mean, I love your point there. It's such an important caveat that this is always going to ebb and flow. And so the idea that balance means equality in every dimension of your life, that's going to change based on the season of your life. Work can be more demanding, family can be more demanding. But for me, the two really important correctives here, as I think about this, are every once in a while, do I take time to slow down and rest, pay attention to my life, pay attention to my health, my spiritual health, my physical health. And then the even harder one, you talk about a scary question, to ask your spouse, hey, how are we doing? What could I do to make you feel more loved? The chances are that could result in a conversation that might be a little bit painful, a little bit scary, that without Jesus might make you feel a little bit of shame. But I think over time, if you overemphasize one of those areas of your life to the detriment of the other areas, it leads to this place of unhealth and harm. And so nurturing a healthy marriage, like you said, taking time to rest and take care of our bodies, exercise is a great example. I think as men, we tend towards the areas of life where we feel like we're succeeding, and we run away from the areas of life that feel like sort of more difficult or more nuanced, or where success is not as easily measured. But those are often the areas of life that tend towards overall health. And so, yeah, I want to be balanced. This is such a great reminder for me, and just a good chance to check in on how am I doing with this, and to ask other people.
That's right. Absolutely. So I think there's some practical things and just sort of all areas of our life that we consider. And then the most important part is our life so unbalanced in the way that our faith is what's getting cut out, that we're not investing any time in our relationship with Jesus. Now, I would argue that the most important thing we can do, well, there's a couple of things, but we want to integrate Jesus into all areas of our life. And so it's not compartmentalizing, oh, well, I've got a little bit of Jesus over here and my faith is kind of over here. And yeah, let me budget a little bit of time on Sunday and maybe 5 minutes in the morning and that kind of thing. No, Jesus is with us and is a part of all we do. So at work, 40 hours a week, it's with Jesus. We should work with Jesus. And when we're at home, we are with Jesus. With that said, I do think when life gets unbalanced and we are so busy and we're other things become priority, and now all of a sudden, and sometimes even family gets such a priority that it's like, wait, I actually haven't cultivated growth in my relationship with Jesus and growing in knowledge and spending just quality time with him in his word and in prayer in a concentrated, focused time. And so when we're unbalanced with our life, that often gets cut out. And so that would be a challenge and encouragement to us today, to also consider. And then when it comes to our faith and what we believe, this is something I'm very passionate about, because so often we can become one-sided. So in fantasy, we can be running back guy. Well, hey, don't neglect the receivers. You need to have 2 receivers in your starting lineup or 3 receivers in your starting lineup. They both score points. They're both part of it. And in light and in faith, God's character, man, we're still, it's amazing. We continue to learn about him and understand and know him. And so he reveals more and more to himself to us as we spend time with him. And he's given us his word. But what we can do is we can take one piece of scripture and go so one-sided on that characteristic of God or that kind of element of the faith journey that we neglect the other things. Go, oh no, I'm going to downplay that. And so, simply, grace and truth, right? It's both. You need a running back and a receiver. They go together. And so our lives, we need to understand grace and God's love and his forgiveness, also understanding truth and discipline and consequence and justice. And so and obedience. So we have to consider the Bible, and we continue to study the Bible and understand who God is in all of his goodness and fullness. And so let me read this in Galatians. So if we focus so much on justice and truth without considering God's grace and mercy, we can lose balance and then become legalistic. So in Galatians 2:21, Paul says, I do not treat the grace of God as meaningless. For if keeping the law could make us right with God, then there was no need for Christ to die. In Romans 6:1-2, Paul also writes, well, then, should we keep on sinning so that God can show us more and more of his wonderful grace? Of course not. Since we have died to sin, how can we continue to live in it? And so if we lean so far on faith and grace at the expense of obedience and good works, that's a problem. And then, our good deeds, again, don't save us, but they do reveal that our faith in Jesus is genuine, making our lives marked by faith in action. They go together. Faith in action. And so James 2:14-17 asks, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye and have a good day, stay warm and eat well, but then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds, as it is dead and useless. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. So this is an important topic for us to go back to and consider in our lives. Wait, I'm getting so focused on kind of doing things and action, and I'm so focused on obedience that, man, I forgot about the goodness of God's grace and love to show to other people, to show to myself. And then if we get so willy-nilly, cheap grace, free, yeah, woo, just throw it out everywhere, and we don't hold ourselves accountable or anybody else, and disregard obedience. I'll do what I want. God will show me grace. Well, that's not the answer either. So, Trip, I'm sure you consider this often, but what's your take on this?
Yeah, man, I love how you always root these devotions for us in good scripture. I mean, I think about, when you go to like a theme park or the fair and you see one of those caricature artists that'll draw a picture of your face, and they always accentuate, certain parts of your face and then sort of downsize other parts. They give you the big nose and the small ears, the big eyes and the little chin. And I think that we are prone to doing that with God. We're prone to accentuating one of his attributes, making it really big, and forgetting about another one of his attributes. And so speaking the truth in love, the truth and grace dichotomy is such a great example. Brentley and I, my wife and I, we always talk about how we go through life together so often parallel, where we love to do things together, take care of our kids together, be active in our neighborhood and in our community together. We care about one another's jobs. But if we don't get time where we're getting face to face, paying attention to each other and remembering who that other person is and how much we cherish them, that harms our relationship. That's exactly what you're saying about with Jesus. I want him to go with me everywhere I go, and I want to be in him in all that I do. But sometimes I got to get face to face with him and make sure that I'm not dealing with a caricature, but I'm dealing with the real Jesus. And the best way to do that is through his word, because he is a real and living person. He will correct us and heal us through his word. And I just want to keep coming back to the Bible and how he shows himself in so many different ways across the Bible.
Amen. Absolutely. So yeah, let's continue to seek God and understand all aspects of his character and word, and not be so one-sided. And then, when it comes to just other areas of our lives as well, let's be intentional, strategic, and disciplined to create balance. And when things get out of balance, to be disciplined enough to say, all right, what adjustment can I make? In fantasy, it's like, I got too many running backs. All right, I got to go add a receiver. So, all right, if my week is slammed and it's too full with one aspect, all right, yeah, I got to incorporate friends, family, work, church, whatever is kind of getting squeezed out, we got to reevaluate that.
Can I jump in there, man? I mean, I think so. One of the things that's going to be true for me next fantasy season, because of my relationship with you, is I'm going to pay more attention to the running backs in my draft, right? You are a healthy corrective to me in that way. How much more in our spiritual lives? Do you have friends? Do you have brothers and sisters in Christ where you can say, I think I'm getting imbalanced in this direction? Or do you see me kind of leaning in one direction to the detriment of another area in my life? And hey, these fantasy football leagues that you're in that are about having fun and playing fantasy together, when you think about these little devotionals every week, when you talk about God's word together, those are great friendships where you can say, hey, I think I'm getting out of balance here. Can you help me think more about this? Will you pray for me about this? And so there's a great corollary there between good fantasy advice and good life advice and praying for our brothers and sisters.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's good. And just the people that I read and listen to is from spiritual influences as well.
Right.
I got some variety, some different perspectives, and not crazy stuff, but just, slight, maybe we're there a little bit more of an expert in a certain area, or a little bit of a bent, then helps me become balanced. Right. And same with friendships and mentors. And I've got different kinds of mentors, and some are, real wise from a marriage standpoint, some from a dad standpoint, financial standpoint. I've got a mentor in ministry, so he's been in ministry a long time. So those are all key decisions that help us live with more balance, and ultimately we want to thrive and find victory in our day-to-day life. So I hope that is encouraging to all of us. I know it is to me to evaluate and consider.
Amen.
So there you go. That's this week's breakout. Do you have a balanced roster? So we'd love to know your thoughts. You can leave comments. Always send me an email, Bryce@fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Let's get to our next segment. We call this accountability and confession. Here we go.
Listen, I'm running this show, and you got to take my advice. I know what I'm doing.
You blew it!
How could you have such horrible instincts and survive this long?
What is wrong with you?
Let this be a reminder to you all that this organization will not tolerate failure.
All right, there you go. So we like to admit when we're wrong here on the show, when we miss on certain players, but then also, hey, we acknowledge, hey, this is working out. Lean into some of those things as well. But let me start with the Raiders, because this is one of those weird teams in the NFL. And I will confess that I had Zamir White in 2 different leagues. I hung on to him way too long. but I finally dropped him in both leagues. So he is gone. He's off my team. But then I'm such a silly man. I don't even know his name, but Dylan Laub.
I think is right. Yeah.
Dylan Laub.
It's a silent E there.
Okay.
Laub.
Dylan Laub is a rookie from New Hampshire. I did a bunch of research on him. I just didn't get his pronunciation. But I picked him up as this third string running back rookie that had a nice little training camp. Didn't do great in preseason, but I thought, all right, with Zamir being out injured, maybe this guy will come in. So I picked him up in 2 leagues instead. And then, of course, Amir Abdullah is the guy that ends up doing pretty well. Whereas Madison didn't even do much and they lost to Denver. So moral of the story is probably just don't worry about the Raiders too much.
The wheels are coming off in Las Vegas before our very eyes. And you were not wrong to think that Zamir White could be a serviceable running back. I don't think Antonio Pierce knows what he's doing. And now with all the Devontae Adams rumors, with the running back carousel, with the guys who are making quote unquote business decisions every week, the wheels are coming off before our eyes. And I just want to get out on that offense entirely if I can.
Yes. I'm not buying in that it turns around, and, because Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, who cares? I mean, the difference between those two is so minimal. Antonio Pierce talking about, we're upstairs discussing. I mean, can you imagine the conversation discussing who should we start this week between those two? I mean, come on. Anyway, I don't even want to talk about him anymore. So I'm out on the Raiders, but I was wrong, so I confess that. Speaking of bad teams, the Panthers. All right, I was all excited about Andy Dalton. I stand by the excitement. It was still the right move, but he did not play well against Chicago. And then that meant Deontay Johnson did not play well, scored 5 points, which was very disappointing because I am all in on Deontay. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the Panthers the rest of the way. Like I said last week, I will stand by this. Chuba Hubbard, all reliable. I mean, the guy he's just so consistent. Keep Chuba, he'll be fine. You're good with Chuba unless he gets injured, but he's great. But as far as this passing game, and does Deontay get traded, and do they go back to Bruce Young? I don't know. It's just sort of it's a mess. It's not good because now their offensive line is bad, which actually may affect Chuba too, but especially from pass protection, and he's getting crushed back there. It's very concerning if you want any of these Panthers wide receivers. So I got to acknowledge, all right, Deontay might let you down, and I'm sorry because I've been all in on him.
I mean, I think for me, so we're at the point in the season now where we can start to say, here are some really solid defenses. And for me, players that I'm on the fence about, start or sit, one of the determining factors for me is, are they playing one of those elite defenses? So my accountability here is that the London game messed me up a little bit because I had Sam Darnold in my starting quarterback slot. I had Trevor Lawrence sitting on my bench. Darnold is playing the Jets, an elite defense. Trevor Lawrence is playing Indianapolis, a terrible defense. And that turned out to be the difference between me winning and losing in that league this week. I would have, I think, switched Lawrence if I had thought about it a little more, but I just wasn't paying attention to the matchups. The Denver Broncos are a great defense. Okay. The Chicago Bears, really good defense. The Steelers, good defense. And so the two things that I'm doing with that information are those on the fence start and sit decisions. The opposing defense is what it comes down to for me. And if I can find somebody who's really nervous about a bad performance because the team just played an elite defense, which I think is Deontay Johnson falls into this category. For me, those are the kind of guys I want to buy low. If the owner's getting nervous because they got shut down by the Jets, I'm more than happy to kind of take advantage of that and get one of these guys that's coming out of a difficult stretch of schedule. Like the Bears are going into just such a delicious stretch of soft defenses, and you can capitalize on that if you're paying attention.
Well, that's a good point, though. The Bears defense is legit.
Good.
So really we have to like sort of retrain our brain a little bit to go, oh, okay, maybe the Bears aren't they're not a dumpster fire by any means. Dumpster fire, Cleveland Browns. You don't want any players on the Browns.
True dumpster fire there, yeah.
So unfortunately for them, New England's a weird team. So the Patriots have been bad so far this season. I think they won week 1 and they've lost since. So Ramondre Stevenson was benched, and this is so classic that he has a big game after being benched. And so we should have been totally surprised by it. I understand if people benched him in fantasy this week, but he's so much more talented than Antonio Gibson. And I personally don't worry as much about fumbles. Like they're somewhat unlucky. Like, can you get better at holding on to the ball? Sure. And does it get in your head a little bit? I'm sure there's some of that. But Stevenson's better than Antonio Gibson. So you still don't want to just get rid of Stevenson. Keep him in the mix. And so he ended up having 15 fantasy points this week. But the receivers in New England are guys that you got to keep an eye out for. We'll talk waiver wire in a little bit. But Polk and Douglas are two guys to consider, because let's say Drake May comes out and actually throws the ball down the field and gets a little bit, of this offense going. It's just something to consider, because I think right now we talk about dumpster fires. Like, I'm out on the Raiders, I'm out on the Browns, the Patriots. I don't know if you want to be totally out on them if they make the change, because there's some hope there. Whereas the Raiders, there's no hope there because both quarterbacks are the same. Whereas maybe I'm not a big Drake May guy necessarily, but let's consider those two receivers that are on waiver wire that have some talent. If you watched a little bit on Sunday, ooh, okay. Oh, I see a glimpse. Okay, nice. There's some potential. Anyway, that's
I mean, if the season ended today, the Patriots would have the first overall pick. And I think that they are totally fine with that. I don't think that they will bring Drake May in until around their bye week, which is week 14, So I think they're fine with just this kind of slogging through the season. Maybe we pick up a win here, a win there. But Drake May, I think, is going to be a serviceable NFL quarterback, but not if they rush him in. And so, but you're right. If you're in a PPR league, Demario Douglas is a guy that you can play during these bye weeks that are coming up. So
yeah, with injuries and buys, like it's hard to just eliminate teams completely, right?
You can't do it. Do it
again, unless you're the Browns or the Raiders. That's probably safe there. But all right, let's speaking of some of this panic here, let's do our segment we call Peace or Panic, because man, there are some teams that have been struggling and players that have been struggling. How do we feel about those teams? We don't have peace or panic. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. So
peace or panic.
Thank you. All right. So Breece Hall, he we mentioned the Jets earlier, back-to-back weeks under 10 fantasy points. So are you selling him or going to try to trade for him? Peace or panic for you?
It's so wild to say this with Christian McCaffrey and Breece Hall now, but if there are still people out there that think this is a top 3 running back for the rest of the season, if I could capitalize on that and trade for kind of a tier 2 RB, I think that I would do it. I'm worried about their offensive line, and I'm worried about the Jets' whole situation now with the coaching change and the Aaron Rodgers negativity. So it depends on what you can get back, but that name value can still get you a lot. And I think that I would be happy to abandon ship for the right price.
Yeah, I think the Jets, it's panic time.
Mm-hmm.
It is panic time in New York. All right, staying in New York, the Buffalo Bills, couple weird weeks for them.
Weird.
Okay, I was all in on Dalton Kincaid, a little confession there. He has not been great. He hasn't been horrible, but he hasn't been great. He's averaging 8.2 fantasy points per game. He's tight end 12. I wanted him to be a top 5 tight end. That's what I drafted him as. And so only 1 touchdown, which is a bummer. So Dalton Kincaid, Josh Allen, peace or panic, Trip?
Josh Allen was 9 for 30 in this game, 9 completed passes out of 30 attempts. Something weird is going on there. He got knocked out, dude. That guy had a concussion, and they took him out for one play, and they were like, yeah, but you're really important, Josh Allen. Get back out there on the field. So that said, I'm not panicking. I think the Bills are a competent franchise that will figure out how to turn it around. And Kincaid is the tight end 12. There are not many guys that you can kind of pivot to that are going to be more reliable than him on a weekly basis. So.
Or have more upside.
Right.
So I still want him to be that number 1 target, and he's yet to become that guy for Josh Allen. But I would buy low on Khalil Shakir. Mm-hmm. I like him because when he's out there, he catches a lot of passes. He'll sneak into the end zone every once in a while. And then Keon Coleman looked pretty good the other day too. He was kind of a bright spot for them. So I'm not panicking with the Bills.
They're going through some growing pains, but I think that they'll get it figured out.
I do too. All right. What about Seattle? Aaron, our producer, is a Seahawks fan. He's devastated. DK Metcalf drives him nuts. Kenneth Walker wasn't quite as great as he was on Monday Night Football when he scored 3 touchdowns, but we expected a little bit of a dip for him. He was still fine, but overall, the Seahawks, they lose another game. Not quite as impressive as we saw in recent weeks. I'm still not going to panic. I'm still in on the Seahawks. I still think they're I still have JSN and DK and Kenneth Walker. Those are my 3 guys, and I'm not willing to move on from any of those guys. They will remain in lineups. JSN may not start every week, but as a flex guy on certain matchups. with certain matchups. So what about for you?
I think this is the second week in a row, I think, that Kenneth Walker was the only running back with rushing attempts. So Charbonnet is getting some passes and some dump downs, but I'm not worried about Kenneth Walker at all. He's going to continue to be their bell cow running back. And with those three receivers, I think that you're just kind of playing, you have to put them in your starting lineup, recognizing that if you want to get the boom weeks, you're going to have to take some of the lumps, some of the bust weeks, So I don't know if it's going to be Metcalf or JSN or Lockett on any given week, but I know that all three of them are good receivers with a good quarterback. And so I think I'm just holding my nose and putting them in, maybe unless they're playing one of those truly elite defenses. I can't figure out what happened in this Giants game. It was just a weird game, and I think the Seahawks will turn it around.
Yeah, I do too. Big Thursday night game against the 49ers.
Yeah, that'll be fun to watch.
Woo, that's a nice one this week.
49ers, it feels like a must-win for the 49ers, which is a weird thing to say, but yeah, it's going to be a good game.
Absolutely. All right, last piece or panic. Chris Olave, the Saints. We talked a little bit about the Saints earlier today, but Olave has not been a wide receiver one this year. He has not played like one week in, week out. He's had a couple decent games, but he has been a huge letdown, and I am absolutely panicking to the point where I'm not sure I can start him. Now, I don't know what kind of trade value he has, if any, but I think he's going to have to be moved out of my lineups. I really do. I guess I have him in one league, but I'm struggling in that league because I need him to be a wide receiver one, and I drafted him to be that. So there's
panicking there for sure.
All right, let's do one quick would you rather, and then we will get to our bandwagon riding and who is that as we talk about the waiver wire. But let's do a big would you rather. Here we go.
That sounds good. I'll have that.
It's a good time. Do you know what I mean?
This is Would You Rather.
I'm psyched.
All right, so I mentioned earlier Devon Achane out. We don't know how long, but even you factor in him, and we've been talking about the Dolphins the last couple of weeks because they are such an important fantasy NFL team because of the number of weapons that they have and what we've seen in years past, especially passing game and running game. But here's the would you rather. The rest of the season, would you rather have Raheem Mostert or Jalen Wright? All right, so Mostert, 19 carries, 80 yards this past week. They barely won. That was an ugly game. And then Jalen Wright rushed for 13 times, 86 yards. So very similar, less carries. So the Dolphins, they're going on their bye week. Achane may come back after that, but a lot of people maybe dropped Mostert potentially in short, smaller leagues. Or Jalen Wright has been on the bench because he just hasn't, or been on the waivers because he hasn't gone off yet. This is a little bit of a breakout game for him. There was some hype coming into the season. My preference is the younger guy. He's unproven, but I love young running backs and the potential and the ceiling. And so I want Jalen Wright the rest of the way if I can snag him, with the caveat, this Dolphins offense is very concerning. So, but again, with injuries, buys, you gotta factor everybody in. Jalen Wright's for me. What about for you?
Definitely Jalen Wright. Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Dolphins' chances for the rest of the season. They're saying they think Tua is going to come back. I have a hard time believing that. They got to figure out the quarterback thing, but I want to go with the young running back, and he looked good in this game. Mostert looks like he's tapering off. Same with Jeff Wilson. I think Jalen Wright's going to be the guy that you want come like week 8, week 10. I think he'll be the starter.
All right, there it is. So that's would you rather. Quick one today, but we will jump into some bandwagon riding, some big performances from guys that maybe we've talked about in recent weeks, and they had a big breakout game. So are we jumping on their bandwagon?
Get off the bandwagon.
It's time for bandwagon riding. Getting on, getting off. Make up your mind, all right?
All right, the Indianapolis Colts with Josh Downs and Joe Flacco throwing the ball to Josh Downs, and even Michael Pittman got in the end zone again. He scored. And so Flacco, we talked about him last week. He's just better for this offense. It's crazy. But specifically today, are you jumping on the Josh Downs bandwagon? 9 catches, 69 yards. He's averaging over 16 points per game in the 3 games that he's played coming off of injury. He was my guy last year. I'm on the bandwagon. What about you?
I think so. I'd rather get on the Josh Downs bandwagon than the Alec Pierce bandwagon for sure. The reality is with this team that if Anthony Richardson is healthy, he's going to start. And I think that'll be true for the rest of the season. He is the future there, no matter how well Flacco plays. And that just means when he's the starter, you won't be able to trust any of these receivers, really. But if Flacco is starting, for sure, I'm putting Downs in my starting lineup. And the thing about both of these guys is that Anthony Richardson can still throw a big, long bomb down the field, and that could salvage your day with a Josh Downs or an Alex Pierce. So, yeah, I think I'm tentatively on the Downs bandwagon.
All right, let's stay with receivers. Last night, Juju Smith-Schuster out of nowhere. What a performance. And guess what, Trip? I picked him up before the weekend. So he was on my bench. But I did jump on his bandwagon. And I'll say this. Now I'll try to trade him.
Yeah,
that would be
that's probably the best course of action.
That would be my hope. So I thought, let me just roll the dice and see what wide receiver ends up catching some passes this week. I think it's going to be different every week. You can't really rely on any of those guys necessarily. I mean, Worthy, even, it's like he's not putting up big numbers every week. You just can't count on him, even though he's kind of an exciting player. So I'm going to say I'm kind of off the bandwagon with Chiefs wide receivers and running backs for that matter, just because I just don't. It's just too inconsistent. It's great for the Chiefs, but not necessarily for fantasy.
I think I might say that I'm on the Juju bandwagon.
Oh, okay.
I thought that Juju for sure I was going to go look at his player profile, and he was going to be like 32 years old. He's 27 years old.
Really?
There was a time.
Wow.
I know. Isn't it crazy? It feels like he's been around forever.
Man.
There was a time in Dynasty that Juju was the #1 wide receiver overall. Now, that was a long time ago. Okay. But Juju,
really?
You remember his second season, he was wide receiver 8 with the Steelers. I mean, Juju, supposedly he's just kind of an immature guy, spends a lot of time playing video games,
he's
right?
27.
Like, yeah, maybe he's finally grown up, but I do think 2 seasons ago, he got a really bad concussion towards the end of the season, but he was starting to put things together with Patrick Mahomes before that concussion. And I think that he might just step into the Rashee Rice role. And I think he could be a startable guy for you the rest of the season. It sounds like Rice is officially out for the rest of the season. The LCL he's got to get surgery. And I think Juju might just slot into that role and be a short-term solution for the Chiefs. And he's been with Mahomes long enough that they've got a little bit more of a connection than he does with Xavier Worthy and some of these other guys. So I think I might be in on Juju. He might be my top waiver priority this week if he's on waivers. I mean,
okay, you may have convinced me. I don't know. I might be convinced. Maybe I'll hang on to
it. Could
him.
be rough next week. Are they on bye this week? No, I don't know if they are. I think they might be on bye this week. But Juju, I think I'm cautiously optimistic about what the rest of his season might look like.
All right. We'll give it to you. All right. Let me run through a few names.
They are on bye. Chiefs are on bye. So you got to wait a week to see what happens.
Yeah. You have to claim them this week, though.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of waiver wire, I am jumping on the bandwagon. Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones going down. People dropped him the last couple of weeks because he hasn't been a part of the offense because Jones has been playing well. And I missed and whiffed on getting any Vikings players this year by choice. I didn't want Vikings players, but through 5 weeks, I look foolish. But Ty Chandler's a guy that I would like to go target on waiver wire. Last year, final 4 weeks of the year, he averaged 16 touches for 82 yards and a touchdown each week. So there's a little bit of a history there and getting a part of that offense. I'm also jumping on the bandwagon, Jordan Whittington. This kills me because a couple weeks ago I got a tip, a fantasy guy that I listened to. Hey, go pick him up. I picked him up. He didn't do anything for a couple weeks. I dropped him, and then he finally had his breakout week: 7 receptions, 89 yards. Really back-to-back weeks with at least 6 catches. So he's good for the Rams, even with Cooper Kupp coming back. But he's on a bye week, so you might be able to snag him if other people need a player this week. If you can wait on him, he's somebody to wait on. So I'm jumping on his bandwagon. And then Tank Bigsby. We've had the toughest time with the Jaguars this week, but I ended up going against you and I, and well, maybe our default is to pull for the Jaguars because we were in on them to start the season. I had to start Trevor Lawrence this week as a fill-in bye week quarterback, and he delivered. And along with him, Tank Bigsby, monster week. Unbelievable. I mean, he looked so legit and ran all over the field, got in the end zone a bunch of times, 2 touchdowns, 109 yards. And then ETN just kind of meh. So are you on the bandwagon?
The Colts rush defense is one of the worst in the NFL. and Tank Bigsby is running like a man possessed. So while the rest of that team is having an identity crisis, he is playing for a second contract in the NFL. So I think he's a guy that you can pick up and you're going to be able to start. I mean, what they said in a press conference about a week and a half ago was that they want Bigsby to be the first and second down guy and ETN to be the pass catcher. And through one game, that is exactly what is happening. So that role for ETN is not without value, but it looks like it's going to be kind of a 50-50 thing with the two of them going forward. If you took ETN like second round as your first running back, that you're in a tough spot there. But Bigsby, I think, is going to be playable. Yeah.
Because what's crazy about ETN is that last year through the first, 9 or 10 weeks,
he was great. Yeah.
I mean, he was 3 down back, putting up monster numbers, top 3 to 5 running back every week. So it's just changed. It's changed this year. And so we have to adjust accordingly. So there you go. There's some bandwagon riding. Let's wrap up the show. Everybody's favorite segment. Who is that? Where we talk about guys that sort of pop out of nowhere. They score touchdowns. We wonder who they are. And we wonder, wait, should I know who they are? Should I go get them on waivers? We try to help you navigate all of it. So let's begin with Kaderil Hodge. Now, everybody seemed...
Seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Everybody seemed to score for the Falcons on Thursday night. He had 67 yards and a touchdown. I'm going to say you don't need to go pick him up. Go get Darnell Mooney, but good for Kaderil Hodge. All right, how about your boy, Diami Brown?
That's right, man. Go Heels.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
2 catches, 57 yards, and a touchdown. I don't think you need to go pick him up. You'll be good. All right, the Giants. They looked like the greatest offense ever on Sunday with Daniel Jones lighting up Aaron's Seahawks, and Darius Slayton out of nowhere, 8 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
He's actually a guy I know all too well. He's been awesome. He's been one of those kind of veteran waiver wire guys for me that you need him for a few weeks here or there based on situation. He can help you out. He is reliable. He's solid. He's probably not going to do it the whole season, but when Neighbors is out, he's a guy you can rely on. So I like him a lot.
I think he might get traded in the real NFL. I think before the trade deadline, I think we'll see Devontae Adams, Darius Slayton, and Amari Cooper all get traded to different teams. And so this is a guy that I might make a speculative ad or a speculative cheap trade-off if he ends up on one of these playoff-bound teams, needs another wide receiver. And like you said, he's just a player.
Yeah, he gets it done. I mean, 8 catches, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this guy, 3 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. His name, Charlie Kohler.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
No, I'm not talking about Mark Andrews. No, I'm not talking about Isaiah Likely. I'm talking about the third tight end, Charlie Kohler from the Baltimore Ravens, getting into the end zone. Mark Andrews, we still can't find him, but you can find Charlie Kohler. I mean, unbelievable.
It is so wild, man. And Lamar Jackson just looks so good. I mean, if the season ended today, I think he would be the MVP. And Charlie Kohler's looking like Mark Andrews in his prime out there. And who knows where Mark Andrews is, man. But I mean, yeah, that's such a weird thing that's going on with the tight ends in Baltimore.
Oh my gosh. It's wild. All right. So let's go to, we got to go to the Colts because they had some guys with some contributions. So this running back, no, not Jonathan Taylor. This running back had 5 carries, 26 yards, 3 catches. His name, Tyler Goodson.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
All right. So I'll confess, I did pick up Trey Sermon, started Trey Sermon, and he put up some good fantasy points. And I avoided Tyler Goodson. However, I did some research, watched a little bit of the Colts on Sunday. He's a nice out of the backfield guy. And what's interesting about him is that he may have a role even if Jonathan Taylor comes back as the out of the backfield, third down back potentially. So there could be some value even moving forward. Now, you probably just heard me say those stats. You're like, come on, 5 carries, 26 yards. Who cares? Who is that? He's somebody to consider.
Yeah.
These are for deeper leagues, but I'd keep an eye on him. Staying in Indy, 1 touchdown for Mo Alley Cox.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
He scores once or twice a year. So there you go. And then, all right, last guy, So we talked about, this great Miami offense. Like, they got so many weapons, and they scored 10 points or something when they finished with 10 points. But guess who scored their touchdown for 1 carry, 3 yards and a touchdown? His name, Alec Ingold.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
We probably do know him by now, but he is their fullback.
Right, he's their fullback. And if you watch that drive, for one drive, he put the team on his back. And he said, we are going to score a TD. We are going to win this game. And so they rewarded him with the goal line carry, and he got the touchdown.
Good for Alec Ingold. So, all right, fullback still alive. That's a lost position, but there's like 6 teams that have one. So you always love when they get in. Juszczyk and
Juszczyk.
Patrick Ricard, and there's a few hanging around. All right, great show, Trip. Good stuff. It was a longer show today. Man, it's full. 5 weeks in the NFL, a lot going on. Hopefully you're winning your leagues. I'm feeling pretty good. It's always fun to go on a Tuesday. You look and you go, oh, wow, I'm in first place. So hopefully that is the case for you. So I'm in 5 leagues. 2 of those teams are in first place. And then I've got this team in the Unpacking It League. It's struggling. It is struggling. But here's some encouragement. If you're, maybe you've only won, 1, 2 games so far this season, you're like, oh, my team stinks. Consider, all right, how many points have you put up? And you got to look at other rosters, because I look at the other rosters. I go, these teams are not that great. They're going to fall back down, and I'll rise up. There's plenty of time in the season. We'll be fine. So stay true to your fundamentals, your fantasy fundamentals. Keep a balanced roster. Go snag some guys on waivers. Get ahead of things a week or 2 before. And we're going to win some championships this year. It's going to be fun.
Good reminder, Coach. Thanks. I needed that.
All right, here we go. So for Aaron, for Trip, I'm Bryce. I'm a fantasy manager and a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you next time right here on the Unpacking It Podcast.